Well, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. I'm delighted to be able to welcome Kieran Smith and Matt Story. Welcome, guys. And today we're going to be talking about the coronavirus job retention scheme. As everybody will be aware, the Chancellor made an announcement 2 weeks ago now on the extension of that scheme, and Kieran's going to take us through what that means for you and your business. He also at the same time talked about the extension to the self-employed support scheme. So we're going to hand over to Matt at that point to talk about that scheme and exactly how you apply for that. And obviously if there's any questions around that, you're free to ask. We will be running a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. For those of you familiar with using Zoom, you'll be familiar with the Q&A option. So if you have any questions as we go along, please use that panel under Q&A to ask your questions, and we'll try and answer as many of those live as we possibly can. So at this point, I'll hand over to Kieran, who will start us off with the job retention scheme extension. So over to you, Kieran.
Thanks, Jo. Many of you already accessed the scheme so far, so I'll just give you a bit of intro as to when it came about and how it came about. So announced in March, just before the stringent stay-at-home measures limited the circumstances in which many of us were able to leave our home, the coronavirus job retention scheme, which I'll now refer as the CJRS, has been seen as the flagship government measure to limit the economic fallout from the coronavirus crisis. Since March, the scheme has allowed employers to furlough employees, keeping them on the payroll while requiring that they carry out no work for the employer. Employers have been able to claim a grant worth up to 80% of the usual wages, capped at the £2,500 a month, plus employer national insurance contributions and the automatic enrolment pension contributions. However, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has now announced a series of changes to the scheme which will begin to take effect in the coming weeks. Next slide. So, the Chancellor has announced several important changes to the way the scheme operates, which will affect which employees can be furloughed and the work they can undertake while being furloughed. New slide. Firstly, the scheme will, in effect, close to new entrants from the 10th of June. After the 30th of June, employers will be unable to furlough employees who have not been previously furloughed for a full 3 weeks. At the same time, they will not be able to furlough more employees in the claim period than the number of employees claimed for under the scheme in its current form. In essence, this means by the 10th of June, everyone that you wish to furlough will have to be furloughed by that point to get us to the 3 weeks after, which reaches the 30th of June. New slide. Secondly, and more importantly to the majority of you, from the 1st of July, employers will be able to bring back employees furloughed employees on a part-time basis under a system of flexible furloughing. Employees can be brought back for any amount of time and on any shift pattern, with employers still able to claim for hours not worked that a furloughed employee otherwise would work. Furthermore, the minimum claim period that will be moving forward will be 1 week, which will help a lot of cash flow issues that some of you may be experiencing at this present moment. Employers will also have to pay furloughed employees in full for any hours they work and meet the cost of the employer national insurance contributions and the minimum automatic enrolment pension contributions that this pay attracts. New slide. The value of CJR grants will begin to taper down from the 1st of August. From then onwards, the grants will no longer cover the costs of employer national insurance and or the automatic pension contributions, with these costs passing to you, the employer. However, the grants will still cover 80% of an employee's usual wage up to the cap of £2,500 per month. New slide. From September, the CJRS grants will only cover 70% of the usual wages of furloughed employees. Those employees will remain entitled to receive the full 80% of their usual wages, capped at £2,500. But what this now means is that not only will you be paying for employer national insurance contributions and the automatic pension contributions, you will also have to contribute to 10% of an employee's usual salary, which will make up the 80%. New slide. This goes further into October, where the CJRS grants will fall again by another 10% to 60% of the employee's usual wage. But as with September, those employees will remain entitled to 80% of their usual wages up to the cap of £2,500 per month. This means employers will need to contribute 20% of the employee's furloughed salary, plus the pension contributions, plus the employer national insurance contributions. I think it's key at this point to actually remind many of you that if you are receiving your employment allowance, that many of you will still not have to pay your employer's national insurance because you won't have reached the 4,000 limit at that point. So, new slide. As expected, the scheme has to come to an end at some point, which at this stage has been confirmed as the end of October. At this point, it will not be possible to claim a grant in respect of a furloughed employee. As many of you might find, this will lead to a cliff edge in support and suddenly needing to cover 100% of wages in November, having just been liable for 20% in October, 10% in September, and obviously the government covering it from August and before. This is a five-fold increase to the support that you've been receiving. At this point, employers will have to decide whether they need to bring furloughed employees back to work as previously, or renegotiate their contract, or make them redundant at that stage. New slide. So, what does this mean if you currently have employees who are furloughed? Well, if you currently have employees on furlough, you do not need to change anything until August, when you will need to begin meeting the cost of employer national insurance and the pension contributions. However, it will be open for you to bring those employees back on a part-time basis from July, while still claiming a grant in respect of any of their usual hours that they do not work. This arrangement will then remain in place until the close of the scheme at the end of October, but you should bear in mind that the value of the grant will gradually be tapered down and reduced from August onwards. In essence, if you have an employee that you can give them 20 hours a week that you will pay for, and they're contracted to 40 hours a week, this new furlough scheme will cover the additional 20 hours, which gives you the flexibility and assists your cash flow moving forward through the next few months. So, how can I bring an employee on to flexible furlough? There are two key steps involved with this stage from the 1st of July onwards. First and foremost, which is probably the most important thing you can do, is you need to agree a new flexible furlough agreement in writing with the employees concerned, setting out the new working arrangements. You will also need to detail the pay, when they're required to work, when they're not required to work, and how they will be paid for the hours they work and also the furloughed hours. Ideally, I would advise that this is signed by the employee, as it is an official amendment to terms and conditions. Secondly, you will need to report as part of the claim the number of hours worked by the furloughed employee and the number of hours that they would usually work. We can do this on your behalf. Obviously, we would know the number of hours that they would normally work and the number of hours that they're furloughed. So this is something that will take the stress away from you. So that's how the changes are going to happen moving forward. We're expecting further technical guidance on the 12th of June. And at that point, we'll be able to update more effectively based on the government guidance on how this is to be calculated and the expected timelines in which the claims can be received. So that's me done at this stage on the furlough requirements. And I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Matt Story, who's going to talk more about the self-employment scheme and how this can help you in your business. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kieran. That was all very good and very interesting there. So as Kieran says, I'm going to talk about the self-employment income support scheme extension. So a bit of history here. The actual scheme was announced by the Chancellor in March to run for an initial period of 3 months from March to May 2020. The scheme in its current form provides a taxable grant equivalent to 80% of a self-employed individual's average trade profit for 3 months, capped at £7,500 in total and paid in a single instalment. The scheme opened for applications on the 13th of May, and applications for the current round of grants will close on the 13th of July 2020. So far, 2.3 million claims have been made, totalling £6.8 billion. As pressure was put on the government to provide further assistance for the self-employed, the Chancellor has announced a major new round of funding to support these individuals. So what's the scheme worth now? This second and final grant for self-employed individuals is this time worth 70% of their average trading profits for a 3-month period, capped at £6,570 in total and paid in a single instalment. This will cover the period from June to August 2020. So who's eligible? The eligibility criteria remain the same for the second round of funding as for the first. A self-employed individual, and this includes partners in partnerships, must have trading profits of no more than £50,000 and must receive more than 50% of their income from self-employment. So if you have a property rental business, this does not constitute a self-employment and therefore is not included in the more than 50% criteria. Trading profits will either be based on an average of the 17, 18 and 19 tax years, or where a person has only been self-employed for just over a year, their trading profits and total income in 18-19. Therefore, you must have submitted a self-assessment tax return for 18-19. In fact, HMRC did give taxpayers until 23rd of April 2020 to submit the tax returns for this period, so they could potentially qualify for the scheme. Unfortunately, people who pay themselves a salary and dividends through their own limited company will not be eligible for the scheme, but could be eligible for the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme if they use PAYE, as discussed by Kieran previously. Failing that, you could consider making a claim for universal credit or the employment and support allowance. So can I apply if my work and income have not reduced? Well, the answer to this is no. You will be required to confirm that your business has been adversely affected by the coronavirus when you apply. HMRC would expect to see things like a reduction in turnover, you having to close your premises, or staff having COVID-19 symptoms and couldn't work. Do I need to apply for the first round of funding to claim for the second? There is no requirement at all to make a claim for the first round of funding in order to be eligible for the second. However, if you feel you are eligible for the first wave of funding, then as mentioned before, you have until the 13th of July to make the claim. Are there any restrictions on what you can do if you claim a grant under the SEISS? Surprisingly, no. Unlike the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme for employees, individuals in respect of SEISS grants can continue to work, begin a new trade, or take on other employment. Also, the grant is not repayable, but must be included on your self-assessment tax return for the 2020-21 tax year. So how can I claim for this new round of funding? As with the first round of funding, applications will be made via an online portal with HMRC, set to open in August. If you have not claimed before, you'll need your tax reference, which is your UTR number, your national insurance number, an HMRC government gateway, and if you don't have one of these, you can set one up on application, your bank account details, but you must ensure that the address registered with the bank is the same as per HMRC's records, and personal ID such as a passport or driving licence, as HMRC will have to verify it's you to ensure it's you making the claim. HMRC have also advised that individuals must make the claims themselves and not let their agents, i.e. the accountants, do them. But obviously the accountants can obviously assist with the individual. Further information in regards of how to make the claim is expected to be announced on the 12th of June. So will there be any further rounds of SEISS funding? Unless lockdown measures have to be reinstated, this seems unlikely. The Chancellor described this as a second and final round of funding under the current scheme. So that wraps up everything I need to say on the self-employment income support scheme. I do believe now that we're having a chance for some questions for me and Kieran. So have we got any questions there we can answer?
Yeah, hi Matt. Hi Kieran. Kieran, you need to unmute yourself. Okay, so I've got a question here that's come in regarding the self-employed scheme, actually, Matt. So let me ask you that question first. So are HMRC likely to ask for the grant to be returned to them if later on down the line my accounts show that I haven't my business hasn't been affected by coronavirus?
Yeah, at some point they will be making checks to ensure that people have been claiming this correctly. Now, like I said in my, I said earlier, there must be indicators to show that you have been affected. Things like reduction in turnover with having to close your premises. Now, if it has no impact on you at all, then you shouldn't have made a claim. And if that is the case, and HMRC do find that it's the case, then they are entitled to get that money back.
Okay. Some questions here for you, Kieran, as well. That one question here, I can't see who this is from, it's an anonymous, but if I unfurlough an employee on flexible hours for July, can I then furlough them for August?
At this stage, what we've seen with furloughing is quite a flexible scheme, allowing employers to furlough their staff, then unfurlough them for a day or a period of time longer than that, and then re-furlough them again. We're expecting this to carry on through to the flexible furloughing. With it being reduced from 3 weeks to 1 week, we're expecting to see that this is used quite a bit. However, we are waiting government guidance, which we're expected to receive on the 12th of June, to do more with the schematics of the scheme and how it's going to work. But at this stage, we are aware that if you did have somebody on flexible furlough, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a position where there's no work, you can re-furlough them, providing obviously that you meet the criteria that they've already been furloughed by the 10th of June 2020.
Right, okay. What about, again, another question here. Someone's asking about what happens if an employee refuses to return to work, either, I guess, back full-time or on flexible part-time hours?
So this is quite a difficult one in the sense that there is no legislation as such to do with the CJRS scheme. So if somebody is refusing to come back to work based on they feel unsafe to do so, then unfortunately the law kind of sides with them, because part of the Employment Rights Act states that you can't detriment or subject somebody to detriment, or you can't dismiss them if they leave work or refuse to return to work because they believe there is serious or imminent danger. Obviously, given what we have seen with the COVID-19 outbreak so far, if this escalated to a tribunal, it would be likely that they would see this as an imminent danger and immediate risk of exposure as soon as someone leaves their home. So from that perspective, I would just probably keep using the furlough scheme as much as possible until obviously the government release further guidance as to whether we're going back into lockdown or alternatively whether we're getting less restrictions again. The difficulty here is, like I said, the employee could potentially go to an employment tribunal. But as a business, you need to ensure, and this is key, you need to ensure that your risk assessments are in place and you have done everything you possibly can to enable staff to safely return to work. And on the flip side of that, I would advise to continue to furlough, because if you weigh up the cost effectiveness of safety measures, safety equipment and potential backlash from that individual, it will be better to keep them on furlough. But please, under any circumstances, do not P45 them for not wanting to come back to work.
Okay. Again, another question for you, Kieran. Can you use furlough payments as part of a redundancy notice period?
Right. You can use furlough payments and offset them against your period of notice. You can't offset a redundancy payment. Now, this will only work if an individual, say someone that's had 15 years service, you give them 12 weeks notice, they actually either work the notice or they continue to be on the payroll at that point. You can therefore offset the CJRS grant, but as part of the notice, you would have to pay them at 100%. And if they're on national minimum wage, you would obviously have to increase that to the 872, which it currently is, and pay the difference. What you can't do is you cannot offset against the physical redundancy payment. And it does not work for pylons. By pylon, I mean a payment in lieu of notice. So if you wanted someone to leave there and then, you cannot use any of the coronavirus job retention scheme to offset any of the pile-on payment.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that pretty much covers all of the questions that we've had in. Thank you to Kieran and Matt for your presentation. We will make a recording of this webinar available on our website and social media channels later on. So thank you for everybody for attending, and we look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.